Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
The plates and pancakes. We're sitting down today with Brian Bott. Coach Bott is the owner and day-to-day operational manager of Sports AdvantEdge and Edge Baseball. He's been a performance coach for over 20 years. Bott was a strength and conditioning coach for 2 years at the University of North Dakota, where he worked with all sports. He then moved to Madison to work with the Wisconsin Badger football team for 13 seasons as an assistant strength coach. He was a member of 3 Big Ten championships and 3 Rose Bowl appearances. In his 13 seasons, the Badgers attended 12 bowl games. Bott worked with many athletes who moved on to the professional football. Those names include Joe Thomas, Travis Frederick, Russell Wilson, J.J. Watt, and many more. He has a master's degree in exercise science from the University of North Dakota and is C.S.C.S. certified. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Man, I'm excited to do this. So before we start, I'll disclose that I am a huge Nebraska fan, right?
Awesome. Good.
But I can remember how impressive the Big Ten championship game was when Nebraska first joined the Big Ten and played Wisconsin, and your line was unstoppable. They were well conditioned. They moved Nebraska off the ball. I don't remember what the final score was, like 71
to 31, 70 to 31 or 70 to 37, something like that. Yeah.
They dominated that football game.
Yeah.
And to have guys look like that is a testament to what you were doing with them.
Well, I appreciate it. We had a really unique situation for the 3 years kind of leading up to that game. Ben Herbert, who's the head strength coach now he's with the Chargers, was with Michigan, obviously a national champion, was the head strength coach. I was his assistant. We actually broke position groups up, to be run by, various coaches between me and him. And, I had the O-line, the tight ends, the quarterbacks, fullbacks, specialists. So yeah, the O-line for those 3 years, those guys were my boys. And we did some pretty good things with that group of guys for sure.
That was some of the best Wisconsin teams I can remember. And even being a Nebraska fan, it was like, I think going to Camp Randall and seeing Wisconsin play where not Nebraska, playing somebody else. That way you could go and you could be a Wisconsin fan and you could take in everything that the environment has to offer.
Yeah, I mean, we played that Nebraska team earlier in the year, and they beat us in Nebraska. I think we had a fumble late in the game, and then I think we switched up quarterbacks. Kurt Phillips was the starter in the Big Ten championship game, and that was kind of the Melvin Gordon unveiling. He had a couple end arounds and big runs and things like that. And it was special for me because that was the last game that I was able to win or be a part of a winning game at Wisconsin, because then we went to the Rose Bowl and lost to Stanford, and I stayed on the staff for about 5-6 months and then stepped out. So that was a real fun game for me to be a part of.
It's a good one to end on.
Yeah, for sure. And then there was a lot of chaos after it when Brett left for Arkansas, and it was kind of the first time I had experienced it because I was on the staff when Coach Alvarez was still the head coach, kind of his last 5 or 6 years, and then obviously Brett took over. So that was the first time I had experienced, the college football coaching carousel of guys leaving, guys coming, and things like that. And so, was very fortunate to, be retained by Coach Anderson and Coach Simon, who was the head strength coach at Wisconsin for 2 years. And so it was just a really unique time. But yeah, we were pretty darn good. I mean, the year before when we played Oregon in the Rose Bowl, I think all 11 starters played in the NFL. And that's just, so you got to have talent too to be good, because we were pretty talented, but, a lot of guys put in a lot of work to get to that point.
Well, you moved on from that success to create your own success in the private field. I know you're opening a couple new gyms now all over Wisconsin. You have setups. So getting them up and running, how much of a toll is that taking on you time-wise, mentally?
Oh, man, you should ask my wife that question. It's a grind mentally, no doubt about it. But when your passion is to impact as many people as you can, and our mission to impact in the state of Wisconsin is very strong, as I hope people can see, it becomes something that actually drives you through those points of, are we doing are we doing too much? Are we going too fast? Things like that. So it forces you to, not forces you, but if your passion is real, I think a lot of coaches will be out there saying, well, I really want to help kids and help kids. And then, then the most important question they ask is, what do I get paid? And then everybody wants to get paid, no doubt about it. But if your real mission is to impact, the money will come if you're doing it the right way. And that's, our trainers, our coaches, understand that. And that's really how we go about things. But it's different now because the first couple we opened were in, probably half-hour driving distance to my house. Beaver Dam was a little longer. Verona's about 5 minutes from my house. Wanakee was about like 20 minutes from my house. But then we trickled into the Milwaukee area. We're in Oconomowoc and Menominee Falls. Now you're talking an hour and a half drive. And now, we opened one in Middleton, which was close. But that's a really big location over there. And then now we're in Appleton in the Green Bay area, which is like a 2-hour drive. And so, it becomes a little bit more windshield time, but it's a great opportunity. I use my driving time very efficiently, where I'm making calls and talking, to our directors on different things and talking to different families. So I think that's one thing that I've learned to do is, wherever the day takes me, is to be as efficient as possible.
Now, you've made an interesting point on some of the things I've listened to. You may have a gym in one area, and their athletes may need something totally different than a gym in another area. So managing where you're at and the athletes in that area, how difficult is that? How much input do you have in that, or do you rely on your guys that are in the facility to make that decision?
That's a great question. And I'll just kind of preface that by, like, we're not a chain. You know what I mean? We're not a place where everybody's got the same programs built in, and I'm not selling, because every kid gets a folder, that it's individualized training. They're just taking a copy and paste type thing and putting it out there. Our coaches have to understand and know the athletes. So by running the conjugate method that we do in all of our gyms, and the conjugate speed method that we call it in our gyms, the coaches have to understand that, kind of read the room, so to speak. They have to understand their audience. So there's a lot of moving parts. Philosophically, everything is based off the conjugate method on our days and how we do things. But when you walk into Verona, you may see something different than you see in Wanakee or Beaver Dam. Beaver Dam, we have a lot of middle school kids, so you're going to see some different stuff there. When I look at our Verona location, we have a pretty good population of volleyball athletes, as well as our baseball academy. So you got 70 baseball players that train in that facility. Just from our academy. Some different things are going on there. Wanakee, in my opinion, we have some of the best athletes in the state of Wisconsin that train in that gym. So you got some different things there. But even intermixed within the gyms, you're going to have kids that are all state football players, all state volleyball players, and then you're going to have a fifth grader. And so our trainers and our directors are highly skilled in understanding how to make modifications, how to use the conjugate system with a fifth grader versus a ninth grader versus a volleyball player versus a baseball player, and go from there. So I'll say this, our trainers are pretty damn good. You know what I mean? And I give them a lot of credit. And I've said this numerous times. If I ever got hired, to go back and be a strength coach in the NFL or college, a lot of my staff would come with me, because we hire, in my opinion, the best. We've got, I think, 4 or 5 people on our staff that have worked at Wisconsin in some capacity. So I don't think anyone else, at the college level, you know what I mean? So, we bring on the best that we can for our families, because they deserve the best.
Well, and it shows. You wouldn't have all the locations throughout Wisconsin if people didn't feel like they were getting the best of you.
Yeah, I think we've gotten really smart in in where we locate the gyms. Obviously, all of our communities are very high priority athletic development communities, and there's a lot more in the state of Wisconsin that we're looking at. These are just the ones we've gotten to, and we partner with some pretty influential people in the state that have the same mission, that either went to high school in Wisconsin or played at Wisconsin or are pro athletes in Wisconsin. And just finding really like-minded people that have some influence, that, maybe have some resources to help bring this to these communities has been really important as well. And, a lot of people ask me, well, how why do some of these people, triculate to you or things like that? Well, because I've built trust with them, and we have a relationship with them. And I think that's a misguided thought process that some people, younger coaches have, is that people are just going to be there to help you. Well, you have to do something for them first. If you have to build trust for them and give to them and continue to give to them in order for that trust factor to be there.
Yes, it's a long mountain to climb. It doesn't stop or start because you showed up and you said, I'm here. Well, that's not how the system works.
No. I mean, at the end of the day, whether you're in the private sector or the, college or pro sector, it comes down to developing relationships, developing trust. Because if the families that are in your gym trust you, if the players that you're training trust you, you're going to get so much more out of them because they're going to buy in. And you have to prove that you're going to have success. I mean, I'm going to make a pretty bold statement. I know that, there's different ways to test vertical. And, if you go on X, every jump that any person posts is critiqued and all this other garbage. But I'm pretty sure if the kids that are in one of our gyms goes to this combine at the end of April, that we'll have 3 kids that could vertical over 40 inches, which is a high school kid. We have the 2 top jumps at these combines in Wisconsin, and we've got a 3rd kid that's right on these kids' tails. And that's pretty, I think that's pretty good. I mean, because everybody can jump, you know what I mean? So it's not like we're saying, we have 15 kids that squat 500 pounds, or this or that. I think we've had over a dozen kids run a sub 4.6, in high school. I think people are really, they look at that, sub 4.6 for a high school kid, that's pretty damn good. And I don't care where you're at. There's a lot of people with really quick fingers, and their numbers seem to be really fast until they go. These are at events, like these aren't in our gyms. I mean, these are an event where other people are testing our kids. And so, I think we get pretty good results with what we do.
That goes back to some other things you've talked about, and you talk about it a lot, is get it on tape. Get out there. Yeah. Put it on film. Not your film. You know what I mean? But somebody else's film. Yeah.
Yeah. And and I think, all these combines, and I talked about it on one of my podcasts that I just put out last week, just in a brief quick hit. These combines aren't going away. You know what I mean? All these showcases and things like that aren't going away. And it's a great opportunity for kids to go do some things in front of other people. But if you can't play, you can't play. You know what I mean? So, the main thing still has to be, how are you playing on the field? Things like that. These showcases in combines just validate what the coaches see on film. They think you're fast. Oh, you ran a 4.6. Okay. We can, and then, you're still in that developmental phase. Okay. We can project you to a 4.5 in college, maybe a 4.4. You're in a 4.4, 4.5 in college, you can probably play anywhere, and everybody's going to say, well, you got to run 4.3. That's bullshit. You know what I mean? There's not that many guys out there running that, so at the end of the day, excuse me, your play is impactful, but, what you run when other people, or what you jump or what you do in front of other people, is how you should be judged, not in front of your trainer. I feel like we do a great job in our gyms of making sure that the numbers are really tight on how we evaluate it, and things like that. So I think when our kids go somewhere, they're not surprised. We have kids that they don't think they're going to go to an event and run a 4.5 and end up running a 4.8. You know what I mean? Where they're telling their buddies, this, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then they're 0.3 off. And that just makes the kids look foolish. You know what I mean? And it just really, comes back to, like, sell the kids on results, not on like a fabrication.
Yeah, they're going to know. I mean, because the numbers aren't going to lie. And if they're not performing like you're telling them they're going to perform, they're going to see through you pretty quick.
Absolutely. And, at the end of the day, one of the things that's been really interesting for me is this whole, the social media is just, it's so much different than it was 10 years ago, when we started. And there's so many things on social media that these kids can see. And, a lot of it's not very good, and that's why, from our perspective, we change things up a little bit here and there as far as how we, present our social media. But to me, I want people to see what we do. I don't want to, take a fancy picture and, do this. And, we're not about likes and shares. We're about, showing people and educating people. Like our social media is very educational, I think. And our guys do an incredible job of explaining the why. Why are we squatting with a safety squat bar that goes around the guy's neck and they get chains and bands and they're sitting in a box? I mean, here's why, so you understand the science and the math behind everything.
I will say you guys do an incredible job, and I have plenty of questions that revert back to your social media and some of the things you're doing. But you touched on it there, and that was some of the first questions I had. Was you do have a great podcast, and you do a wonderful job of short hitters, so a guy could listen to it in 10 minutes and get a ton of information. You do a Method Monday and a wisdom. If I can speak
Wisdom
right.
Wednesday, yeah.
Yes, a Wisdom Wednesday. And I listened to the one I've listened to the one you talked about on the combine. I also listened to your newest one. That would bring up the question, is elite a mindset?
I think it's both. You know what I mean? I think it's both. Like anything in life, you have to live it before you are it. And so at the end of the day, like we tell this example would be like our kids that want to play in college. Okay, when they're in high school, we educate them on what the college, athlete needs to do, from nutrition to sometimes having to train in the morning, to study, to hydration, all the little things that go into being a great college athlete. And we tell our high school kids, if you want to play in college, you need to start doing that now and be prepared for it now and not wait till you get to school. You know what I mean? So again, that comes back to, your question. If you want to be elite, you have to act like an elite athlete before you are one. And you have to do the things that elite athletes are doing right now, which means probably watching extra film. It means probably putting your phone away and doing some other things, interacting or learning. If you want to be an elite coach, you have to be learning every day. You have to have a growth mindset to learn every single day. And a lot of times, people will get to a certain level and they relax. Like, I've made it. Coach Bo said at Wisconsin, I've arrived. He would always say, or he's arrived. And we would laugh about it because there's always someone better. You know what I mean? There's always someone better. And for me as a coach, that, there's people that inspire me as coaches that, I'm like, man, he's doing it at a high level. I'm behind. I got to catch him. So that's my mindset. But, being elite, I think there's a false sense for what elite is too. There's a lot of people that think they're elite and they're not even close. Elite is the standard, and that's what we try and, talk about. Sports Advantage. The standard is the standard. And, if you're not up to that standard, you're not elite. You know what I mean?
I think you nailed it there. And that was actually the heart of the question. And you answered it. Was we label all this stuff elite, but it's not elite. It's just people doing stuff. There is a definite line on what elite truly is compared to what we label it as.
Right. I mean, just because you're playing in the NFL doesn't mean, and I think too, and I'm going to go to the NFL, talk about that. I think, are you elite for the circumstances you're in? I think there's other ways to look at it. So in other words, like if you're playing quarterback in the NFL, you're an elite quarterback in the world, right? There's only 32 guys that are starting in the NFL. Now, who are the elite quarterbacks in the NFL? You know what I mean? So now are you in that next tier? So there's always other tiers to look at. You know what I mean? I would say if you're a Division I college athlete, when you start looking over the broad spectrum of athletes across the world, you're probably, in that elite category. Now, are you elite for the level you're at now? Are you an elite college athlete? So now you're separating yourselves from these guys. Okay, so now I'm in the NFL. Well, now I'm elite over these, you know what I mean? So there's always a little bit more that you can strive for. And I think everybody's striving for that quote unquote GOAT status that only one person gets to have, and that's what's cool about it, right? It's almost like a pyramid and it's going up and up, but I think there's different levels of elite as well.
That's a whole unique conversation. And I've not actually thought about it quite that way.
Yeah.
But for you to break it down like that, I think you can find elite no matter where you're at if you strive for it. No matter what your job is or what your circumstances is, there is an elite standard you can attain.
Yeah, I think I like in your gym, like there's going to be, or my gym. You compare the kids that are in that gym at that one time. Well, the 2 or 3 best kids, you would say these are our elite athletes for our gym. Now, are they elite athletes, in the city? Now you're starting to open up that pool more and open up that pool. So the more it opens up, the more elite you become if you can continue to raise your standard.
And that comes back to something you'd mentioned on your podcast is a lot of these guys are elite in their rooms, and then they're going to hit a bigger pond and have to figure out that they should have done more. They should have prepared better.
100%. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're in a smaller school in a smaller community, there's not that many fish in the pond. You use the big fish, small pond analogy, but now you go to a bigger university. Okay, everybody else is good. Like, I love the fans on Saturdays and Sundays that talk about, oh, this guy's not any good, or this guy, is garbage. I mean, he's playing the NFL, guys. Like, he's not garbage. He's just not playing well. Or the elite is a little higher on the other team right now, and so I think in order to get there, like I said, you have to start acting like you're at your next level before you get there. And it's the same thing with me, like in business. When I look at that, I've got to start acting like we own 10 gyms instead of 7. You know what I mean? That's my goal for the year. How can I, figure out how to manage 10 gyms while managing 7, and because you're always looking for the next thing. And I think it comes back to goal setting as well. I think people wait too long to readjust their goals. If you're getting close to achieving a goal, you should reset it higher before you even achieve it. Because a lot of times when you achieve a goal, you relax, you put your guard down, and then people start to catch you.
That is probably the correct way to do it, because as soon as you started getting into that conversation, I realized where you were going to go. Yes, when you attain that goal, there's a kind of resting on your laurels mentality for a while until you figure out where you're going to go next. Where if you plot that before you get there, you have your next point you're moving towards.
Well, and I think, everybody falls into that, right? Because you've worked hard for something, whether it's a PR in the weight room, whether it's business, whether it's, getting a college scholarship, you should be happy, but where does that celebration line end and where does back to work start? And I think, the term built different is thrown around a lot in sports and things like that. I never want to admit someone is built different than me, because now I'm admitting that person's outworking me. You know what I mean? And if you're saying someone is built different, chances are you should probably step your game up, because I know everybody will say that about Coach Saban. Coach Saban's built different, and quite honestly, probably is. I don't know if I could win a national championship and the next day be recruiting guys. You know what I mean? But that's his level of elite. You know what I mean? That's all he knows. And so I think those things are things that people need to think about and I think knowing yourself is important. I've learned that, over the last probably year and a half. It's like, yeah, I want to be really happy because we're opening a gym in Oconomowoc and I'm giving, 2 people the opportunity to have jobs, and we're coming to the community and we're helping the high school and we're helping this baseball organization that we're with, and we're doing that. That's great. But when do I stop feeling happy for that and start getting back to work and be like, how many more jobs can we create for people? How many more opportunities can we get? And so that's always, and I learned that a lot this year because there's a lot of moving parts, and we pretty much doubled in size in 12 months as far as how many gyms we have. And so it's, it's learning. And so now I want to double again, because if we double again, then we're at 14, and, we'd be at 30 to 40 schools in the state of Wisconsin. And then it's one of those things like, okay, like we don't want to oversaturate what we do, but we want to give as much opportunities to communities as we can.
Now, building on some of that stuff you said earlier, you'd mentioned this in last Wednesday's podcast, and I'd never really, I guess, put it in the terms that you did. But high achievers struggle harder to break away from low achievers than vice versa. And that's really a strange concept to me, is low achievers, they'll separate themselves quickly from the hard workers.
Yeah.
Where hard workers take longer to move away from the dead weight.
Yeah, I think, that dead weight wants to kind of be around, so to speak, to a lot of times bring the high achievers down. You know what I mean? Because they're like, I don't want to work as hard as him, and so he must be doing something wrong. And they'll tell you, and in like the high school or middle school, like lingo nowadays, I'm drawing a blank. Oh God. Oh, try hard. Kids will call each other tryhards, like as a negative thing. And my response is always, well, Michael Jordan was a tryhard. Kobe Bryant was a tryhard. You know what I mean? Serena Williams, tryhard. Tiger Woods, tryhard. What do they have in common? They're the best at what they do. Tom Brady, tryhard. You know what I mean? And so I think, unfortunately, society right now is trying to bring, like the high achievers back down to the rest of the place. And for a high achiever to fight that, it becomes hard. You know what I mean? It becomes hard. Like, why are you getting up so early? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Because I love it. Why do I get up at 4 a.m? Because I love it. And because I've, put a mission out there that I want to live by every day. And that becomes easy for me. But there's always people that are going to tell you, why are you doing that? Why are you working so hard? That's not going to turn out great. Keep telling me that I can't do it, because that's always the best. High achievers love it when, people that are lazy or mediocre tell them that they can't do something, because like you're looking at them and you're like, okay, well, maybe you can't do it, but I can.
And low achievers are the ones who want to decide what fair is.
Yeah.
You don't hear high achievers saying, well, that wasn't fair. Well, that's not fair. That doesn't seem to enter their vocabulary, but a low achiever will always establish what fair is.
And so will their parents. You know what I mean? So will their parents. I think that's what's the really nice thing about sports like swimming and track, and things like that. The fastest person gets to go. The person that throws it the farthest gets to go. When you start talking about team sports, now you're starting to talk about, in opinion, right, wrong, or indifferent. And even like if you look at baseball, just because a guy's hitting 500 doesn't mean he's a better hitter than the guy hitting 300. It just means that, some balls have dropped and some other things like this. So I think, the media, what I called it, I think mediocre people. It was a saying from, Coach Saban, who I listened to all his stuff, because I just, he's done at the highest level. And so I try and pattern, just my work ethic after him. It's just mediocre people want everybody to be together. You know what I mean? They don't think that you should do extra shots. They shouldn't, get this. And I can't remember who the guy was. He did a talk on, it was at a basketball. Oh gosh, I wish I remembered his name, but he was talking about who gets to shoot the most, the best shooters. Who gets to play the most, the best players. We're trying to win games here. And if you want to be a guy that gets more shots, what should you do? You should work on your shot more. You know what I mean? And it comes down to there's no real easy way to success. And I think the internet and Instagram and TikTok want people to see, young people flash and stuff around. There's no easy way to success. There's no hack. Like, you have to go through the wall every single day that you put your back up against.
Now, what you've done really well is you've developed great coaches along with great athletes. So they, in turn, become spokespeople for what you're doing. You're sending them out in the world, and they're a reflection of your gyms, your programs, what you've developed. Are they your best sales tool?
I think that's a good question. The results our athletes get are always going to be the best tool, and word of mouth, right? The things that we do to, work with our parents and our families, I think are unique on how we, educate them. But yeah, our coaches are as well. How well are they interacting with the kids? Are they someone that the kids want to come and see on a regular basis? How well do they represent Sports Advantage? It's a different concept. Now you have 7 gyms versus 3. So, there's more eyes on all of our organizations. So, little things matter. Things that don't happen in our organization, but I know happen in others. Like, our coaches don't show up late. They're always early. They're always prepared and things like that. So like sometimes you'll walk into another performance gym and they don't know what they're doing. It's kind of like last minute they're running, late and things like that. I think all those things matter. And then like if something like that would happen in one of our gyms, that's a reflection of us all. And our trainers know that because I'm like, you're not just hurting, yourself and your appearance, you're hurting Sports Advantage as a whole because a couple of those kids are going to tell their buddies and their buddies might, their buddy's mom or father might know someone that lives in Madison. They'll tell that person, and all of a sudden it just spreads. So, the accountability, the ownership, which is one of our pillars for success in how you carry yourself, how you're perceived is very important because it reflects on all of us.
Now, what you said in there, it seems like a given, but it's not. You have to enjoy kids. I worked with horses for a long time, and I think it took me way too long to appreciate the horse as the horse. And once I got that figured out, everything fell into place a lot better for me. I think the same thing applies here. If you don't like kids and you just like the weights or whatever, you're never going to get the results as opposed to the guy that enjoys being around the athletes and the kids. And then the weights come second.
Yeah, I think that's one of my first questions when I interview someone. Like, why do you want to work in the private sector? And if the first answer is, well, I want to work with NFL athletes and college athletes, my responsibility will go get an internship in the NFL, see how easy that is to try and get that, or go get an internship at college where you're working 60 hours a week for no pay because that's what it takes to go work in those environments. If someone responds, I'm really interested in helping young people. I'm interested in developing this. I want, strength and conditioning is my passion. It's got to be a passion for them because this is different than working in the team setting. Now we will have teams that train with us to get that, if they're having trouble with their high school or whatever. But I want people that want to impact lives. I want people that want to work with the young people in America and in Wisconsin and develop them in more than just athletically, like socially, spiritually, mentally, physically, obviously, with what we do. But there's so much more that goes into Sports Advantage than just, the conjugate method. I mean, some of the messages I get from my parents, are incredible. How kids' grades have gone up, how kids set their own alarm, 7th grader, to come in and lift at 5:30, 4 days a week, which some of these things are just incredible to get messages like this and the impact that we're making on these kids' lives. Because I know this too, like I'll never forget my high school coach. I'll never forget my middle school basketball coach. I'll never forget my travel team baseball coaches for the lessons they taught me. I'll never forget my college coach. Those are the people that impact your lives so much. And you can impact them one of two ways, positively or negatively. And so we always want to be, one of our core values is be the plus. So every time a kid walks in that weight room, we want a positive experience. And if we can, we want that to be their best experience of their day. So we want to be their plus every day. That's one of our core values for everybody.
And that gets taken for granted a lot. But if the kid wants to be there, you're going to get more work out of them than if their parents are dragging them in saying, I pay this much money a month, you're going.
Right. And we also have to remember that not everybody likes the weight room. You know what I mean? And so then it becomes a challenge of how can you make it enjoyable for him? Like, yeah, it's great if he increases his vertical jump 3 inches. That may not be what he's looking for. He just may be looking, or she may just be looking for, people to have interaction with, or a team, or a group. I'll share this story. One of my former NFL players came to me last week and said to me, hey, what do I need to do to be a part of Sports Advantage? I miss the team atmosphere. And it's like, you're sitting there and you like realize how important those things are. And especially like to a 7th and 8th grader who maybe he doesn't have a lot of friends at school, or maybe, he's introverted or she's introverted, or, a little nervous being around other people. And now all of a sudden you come into this, facility where you have kids of all ages, everybody's supportive, kids of all different schools. And you start to gain confidence in who you can be and who you are. And so there's so much more that we bring to the table than just, how much can you box squat? Now that's important to us too, but there's so much more that we bring to the table.
Yes. And providing a place where kids can kind of go and just unload some of that baggage that they carry is definitely helping, probably like you said, helping grades, helping wake up. I mean, they have a place they can go that's they're going to work hard, but it's a great environment just to unwind.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's something that a lot of kids are looking for that. A lot of kids and families are just looking for a place or a gym or something like that to be a part of a community, to gain some more friends, to build some confidence, to have fun, So I think those are all the things that we do a really good job of providing.
Now, you've coached at the highest levels possible, and I heard you talk about this. I've also heard Chris Corfus talk about this. Everybody wants to be at the highest levels, but you learn the most at the lower levels, the beginning levels. You see more problems, more issues, more things you have to work on. It really expands your ability to coach by the environment that throws a lot of curveballs at you. Getting people to understand that.
Yeah, when I was on the West Side Barbell podcast a while back, and that was something that Tom and I talked about, for a while. It's like you learn to be a coach with middle school kids. You learn how to coach. Because again, that's the teaching part of it. And then, kids that have, maybe movement deficiencies, kids that have mobility deficiencies, kids that aren't, accustomed to picking things up that are heavy. And so that's where you really learn how to be a great coach. And you can take those principles over to some of your better high school kids, college kids, NFL guys that now have a foundation, and now you can build off that. But you really learn, how to coach and correct. And, we say we don't let the kids ever win, which means if they're technically not doing it right, we're going to coach them until it's right or till we change it. We're never just going to be that place where it's like, hey, don't let your knees go here, or don't let your knees cave when you squat. Does it again. Don't let your knees cave here. Let's correct this stuff, like, give them a correction, whatever. And if they can't do it after 3 or 4 times, hey, we got to find a different exercise. So in order to take you a step back, so then we can build you into a scenario where then you can do the exercise we're looking for. But we're never going to just be like, well, he can't do it or she can't do it, so we're just going to let him keep doing it. I mean, that's the worst thing you can do as a coach.
In that same podcast, you also talked about this, a school that's trying to take off and trying to build a program. It's almost the opposite of what you think. It's not a build it and they will come. It's get who you want that knows what they're doing, and then build the facilities.
Yeah, I mean, bells and whistles are great. You know what I mean? Everybody wants all this cool stuff. But if you don't have anyone that can coach it, you just have a pretty building. You know what I mean? And buildings don't win championships. People do. And so at the end of the day, you have to have the right people in place. And schools are making that mistake all over the country right now. They're looking for the next best thing. Last time I checked, in high school, very few high schools are recruiting kids to come to it. Most schools are demographic and location driven. So if you live in this area, you go to this school. There's some private schools out there that have the ability to recruit. But at the end of the day, like if you do a great job developing athletes, you don't need fancy stuff. I mean, we had in our first Verona gym, we had nuts and bolts. We had 8 rogue racks, just the stand up racks, barbells, bumper plates, couple reverse hypers, couple glute hams, dumbbells, kettlebells. We didn't have chains at the time. We didn't have bands at the time. And a lot of our first kids that trained with us those first couple of years all played college sports. For 7-8 years they developed. And so you got to know how to coach in order to use fancy toys. A fancy toy doesn't do anything if you don't know how to coach the basics.
Now, we've kind of talked about different aspects of the mentality, the setup, different things like that. But so kind of to touch on that again, getting athletes to turn it loose. When they go to the combine, like you say, you got a bunch of guys getting ready to go to. How do you have them prepared to leave it all there and give everything they have?
Just in our preparation, they've done the event at least once, maybe twice, so they understand it when there aren't eyes on them. And we coach them on understanding with 400 to 600 kids at an event. The warm up is probably not going to be at the same level that what we do, and the same thoroughness, because you just can't, no matter who's running it. If you're used to doing RPR and you go to an event, you should probably do the RPR on your own. You know what I mean? Because most of the time, when you're doing a showcase event, you're not going to have someone leading RPR for 200 people. So we educate them on that. We educate them on, the timing between, events. We call it events. It's kind of like the Olympics for our kids. We call it events. The timing that you'll have between maybe the 40 and the vertical, you're going to have this much time. Is that a time where maybe you want to have like half a protein bar to make, because they're long, they're 3 hours, and some kids, need that fuel. We educate them on the couple nights before, the hydration plan and how to be ready for that. We educate them on their sleep patterns, the week leading up to it. And all those things, without doing the actual event, build confidence in the kids, because they're going to think to themselves, that week out, now I have a plan, so now I'm prepared. I've gotten 8 to 9 hours of sleep for 4 or 5 days. I've drank, X amount of water. I've eaten, really good food. I've done my recovery work, so my body's going to be rested, fresh, and healthy. So when you build it like that for the kids and make it more about just the events of what they're doing and some of the other things, that's going to give them a competitive advantage. We always tell them that, hey, 8 to 9 hours of sleep this week is going to give you a competitive advantage over everybody else. It's just doing, so those are some of the things that we do, and our kids really respond well to that.
And I will look at some training stuff a little bit. Watching your videos, I obviously can see you run a conjugate. That's what we try to do here.
Yep.
I don't know how well we carry it over to what other people are doing it, but that's our goal. So I've heard you talk about this, and I think more of the country is starting to see it. The box squat's not reserved for powerlifters anymore. It's coaches are starting to find out it creates speed, it creates vertical jumping ability. The carryover is so huge that guys that were dead set against it in the past are starting to have to eat a little crow and go back to it.
Yeah, I mean, whether you use it as a training tool or not, use it as a teaching tool. Every kid can sit back and sit on a box, so they understand the depth that's required to do a good squat. But, I know Nate Harvey's talked about it a lot. I talk about it a lot. If you want to talk about like sports specific training, so like that, what better exercise is the box squat? Because it's static to dynamic. You sit down in the box, you pause, and then you try and move the bar as fast as you can off the box. Well, football players, they get in a stance. Baseball players have to generate a swing. Sprinting comes out of the blocks, right? They're stopped. They have to hold. Swimmers have to come off the podium or whatever they call that. Basketball players, if they're in a rebounding position, their feet are set and they jump. Every sport has some type of static to dynamic movement in it. So why wouldn't we utilize that in the weight room? Everybody, I think, confuses sport specific for it looking like the sport. Well, I'm going to be just like point blank honest with everybody. If you got people that are carrying around hockey sticks and kicking soccer balls as a part of their weight room stuff, you're probably in the wrong place, because like that's the sport coach's job. Our job as sports performance coaches is to raise physical parameters while helping reduce injuries. So what are physical parameters? Power, strength, speed, mobility, change of direction. If we can increase those while also bulletproofing our athletes through, exercises to raise up their weaknesses, and then we turn the kid back over to the sport coach. Now, sport coach, your job. They're faster, so don't tell me that it doesn't transfer onto the field. What I mean? If they don't transfer on the field, it's one of two things. Either they're not skilled enough or they don't feel confident enough in what the play is or whatever that to turn it loose. Because I'm just showing you what their numbers are. They're stronger, they're this, that. So you have to coach that out of them. That's not the performance coach's job. They're raising the parameters. So that one really bothers me when people are like, well, how does it transfer the field? Well, there's a lot more that goes on to transferring into a sport than just, well, it didn't transfer from the weight room. Well, that's a cop-out.
I've never heard anybody say that, but I know I've thought that. The numbers are there. Now how do you make it work for you? So at some point there's a handoff. Like, I've done this, now I'm handing you this. What can I do on the reverse side that you're handing me back?
Right. I mean, I think, one of the ones that I see a lot is with linemen. I mean, well, it's not transferring on the field. Well, maybe he doesn't know the play very well, or he doesn't have great technique. Like if someone has better technique than you in different things, they're probably going to be able to catch up that discrepancy of strength and power because you don't know where to place your hands or you don't know where your foot placement is. And so that was like at Wisconsin, that was like the real big thing for us with our linemen is, we had to, change some of the ways we did strengthen them because we needed to start going back to the, building strength with those guys. But we also had an incredible technician for a coach. So now you're taking the weight room and making it better, but you have one of the best O-line coaches, for two O-line coaches actually over that course of time in the country teaching technique. So now you build strength on technique, and that's where you start, that's where elite comes from.
Now I know you coach the box squat hard, and the more I watch it in my gym, there's things I think I see in there that I want to fix. So you're one of the guys to ask. You watch a lot of the newer lifters, and they'll come down that box and they'll almost drop their hips. They'll roll their hips back at the seated position.
Yeah.
To me, that seems like it's a way to dodge the forces, like you're leaking absorption. If you can keep their hips higher so they stay tighter in that squat, you're going to have a better transfer to speed and vertical jump. Am I seeing that correctly, or is that just something I've made up in my head?
Well, I think the main thing that people mistake with the box squat is like when Louis used to say, relax your hips, that doesn't mean relax everything. You know what I mean? So when you sit back, your hips are going to have a relaxation a little bit when you sit, but that doesn't mean you don't brace through this whole area or you don't, stay strong up top at the bar. And a lot of times coaching kids into that is hard because they don't really understand that concept, right? If it's relaxed, everything relax. If it's tight, everything's tight. And so I think some of the things too you'll see as kids roll forward into it, which is, correctable, obviously. And I think the things that I see the most are the touch and goes, right? And, that's not a box squat. It's a touch and go. So just call it a touch and go if that's what you're going to call it, but it's not a box squat. And the other thing is kids crashing to the box where they just think it's a free fall. You have to, when I was really learning about the functional movement screen, got to spend a lot of time with Gray Cook, and Gray was like, you got to teach your kids how to pull themselves into the squat. So almost like you're pulling down to the box. And so that's kind of a coaching cue that we'll use as well. Hey, pull yourself into the box squat versus, dropping to the box squat. And so a lot of times that'll cover itself. I think some of the things we also see is kids will move their feet. You know what I mean? And that's a cue that they're too relaxed, right? They shouldn't be able to move their feet. Their feet should be like dug into the ground. So if their feet are moving, then you have a problem with the rest of the body not being tight.
Okay, now I know I'm biased, so that carries over into a lot of things I talk about and
Sure.
and the questions I ask. But with my bias, I feel like the deadlift, especially the speed pulls, are the most underrated exercise we use in the gym. I don't know how you feel about that, and I'm willing to have a conversation, but I think they get left behind for other exercises because coaches are scared of them.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, and it's funny because you'll hear people talk negatively about the deadlift, but they power clean or that they'll full clean. So it's like, okay, because they're saying it's more sport specific. Okay, well, whenever is a kid got to take the bar from here or do anything and come through there? The clean argument is always one of those, well, it gets to triple extension. I'm going to say this. We walk through high schools across the country, 90% of your kids probably aren't getting into triple extension in the clean. They're just not. It's just not happening. And so, that static to dynamic that you get out of the speed pull, again, carries over and it gets you a lot of what people are looking to get out of the clean. And the clean is a sport. I mean, that's an Olympic lift. You know what I mean? The deadlift to me is a movement. And so if we can get, and you can argue that you may be able to get a little more out of a clean, but risk reward wise, I can teach any kid to pick something up off the ground to his hips. Now, pulling, second pull hip extension, rip, all that other stuff becomes, is the juice worth the squeeze? I mean, is it really that where I can get a kid where he can pick the bar up fast, put it down, 15 seconds later, do it again. And then when you start to look at like the dynamic day as a whole, and you start to do the math on the volume of work that you're doing, that's why we do the dynamic day. And when I break this down, and I don't know, it's a long kind of breakdown, but when you break it down to the math and the science of it, there's no way that you can move a barbell in a clean at the speed you're doing a speed squat or a speed pull and get as much volume in the short amount of time. Our speed squats and speed pulls are done within 10 to 12 minutes. And a lot of our kids are getting between 10 to 12,000 pounds of volume and moving it, hopefully in that 0.7 to 0.9 meters per second. So there's speed, there's load, and then you add the volume together and you look at it and you're like, okay, wow. And then you bring this to someone that does Olympic lifts, and I think people think that I like bag on Olympic lifts. We cleaned at Wisconsin. You know what I mean? But I also had a lot more time to take two guys at a time and teach them the movement over 6 months. And in the private sector, we don't have that. We have kids in and out. You have kids in for 3 months. You just don't have that amount of time. So we have to utilize the resources we have. But when you start back to the math, when you break the math down, you just can't get that much volume in that short amount of time. And if we're looking at speed of the bar, it just won't happen because the bar will get too heavy with the clean movement. And again, then you start talking about technical breakdowns and all the other things that it's just not time efficient on our perspective. Now, I'm sure there are people that feel the opposite of what we do, but this works for us. Our jumps and our speed prove that it works, because there's correlation on what we do. And so that's why we use it. And to me, it's, we have 6th graders that can speed sumo pull. And I have, a guy that plays for the Los Angeles Rams that does it. So everybody can do it. That's the best part about it.
Okay. So I was taking some notes in there for questions, so don't think I was rude. I didn't want to forget them because you bring up some amazing points.
Sure.
I think from where I am and the population I train, I can get triple extension out of a speed squat quicker than I can get triple extension out of a clean if I have them moving the weight fast enough.
Sure. I just think that there's so much more technically that can go wrong with a clean. And so, when you're talking about trying to get the most out of the athlete, you talk about attacking, right? Attacking exercises. Kids aren't going to attack an exercise until they feel confident with it. And again, anybody can pick something up off the floor. Anybody can sit on a box and stand up off it. And so coach those really well, coach them with speed, use accommodating resistance. The bands are a game changer and go from there. Now, if you want to, go into the Olympic lifts, that's your priority. And if you have time to coach it, great. I just know what works for us, and I just know efficiently and effectively what works for us. And, the speed squat and the speed pulls are definitely the two exercises to me that are game changers with the things that we do.
The other question I had wrote down in there, and Nate Harvey hits on it and Conjugate U, and Louis hits on it a ton, was what you said about the volume. So if you're going to take, what the Russians figured out was 12 times your max is where you want to be on your dynamic day. Well, you can move more volume if your deadlift is, let's just take, somebody fairly average, let's say they got a 400 pull. Well, you take that times 12, you can do that volume in, like you said, 10 to 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Where a clean, what's their max going to be? How long is it going to take for recovery in between the set? How long is that going to take? You can have a dynamic day with squats and pulls and be done in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You probably aren't even going to be done with your clean set.
Right.
If that's how you're trying to do it.
Well, and I think too, the clean, if you look at the clean as a whole, I mean, it's multiple movements. You know what I mean? You're also talking about the front squat being a part of, a full clean. Now, if you're talking a power clean, now you're going to start to reduce the weights because you should be able, in my opinion, you should be able to full clean more than you can power clean. So if you can full, you know what I mean? So now you're talking about even reducing it more. So if you look at it, like your example, with the weight, if if a guy is a 400-pound back squatter, well, they can't front squat what they back squat. So we generously, when we use explanation standpoint, say, okay, let's say they can front squat 90% of their back squat, which I think is pretty generous. So that's 360. Well, you can't clean more than you front squat. So let's say, now you're talking technically, so then let's say that they can clean 320, or something like that. And again, I think that's pretty generous. So now you're already talking about 80% of the back squat number, right? So we know that the back squat or the box squat, that's the percentage that we go off of for our speed days. Well, now you're taking a lower number to go off the same percentage. So instead of moving in the box squat, you'd go at 50%, hypothetically bar weight, you have 200 pounds. Well, in the clean, bar weight at 50%, you'd have 160. You know what I mean? So then I know Louis did this. Or he talks about it. I've never been a big guy at hooking bands or anything to the bar when kids clean because the bars are on there. So now you're talking about if you want to get in that, optimal range for speed day, you got to be around 70 to 75% on the low end. Okay. So now you're talking about a kid or a person that cleans, 320, probably doing power clean sets around, probably 330 or 235, 240. Now you're telling me that, based on those things, that person can take a 9x3 in the clean every 30 seconds. Show me. I'd like to see that. You know what I mean? Because that would be interesting to see, because the front squat alone, is going to wear the kids out. And so again, it comes down to, what are your main things? We're trying to build explosive athletes. That's why we lift maximally twice a week. And that's why we lift dynamically twice a week. We see a lot of schools that lift maximally 4 times a week. And, unfortunately, some of those places are going to get results, right? Because you have the ultimate thing working for high school kids, and that's puberty. They're going through growth and they're getting things in their body they haven't had before. So a lot of times I think, strength programs look a little better than they are because the kids are just going through a growth phase. And quite honestly, they're getting stronger by eating, at home and sleeping. You know what I mean? So I think we have to really be careful with that. But you just go back to what we've talked about with the numbers. Strength and conditioning is math and science. And at the end of the day, you can't look at that math and be like, oh, that makes sense to keep doing this. Or, like I said, I sit down with our high school coaches and I draw it out. And I said, here's the volume here. Here's the volume here. And I'll ask them, do you think you have a kid that can do 9 sets of 3 at 245 in the clean and move it as fast as he can do this? And they'll be like, no. Everybody will say no because it just makes sense.
And I know there are guys out there that love the clean, and
Yeah.
neither one of us have bashed on it. It's just not what we do. I wonder if there's merit in a speed front squat using those numbers to help boost your clean later on. Now you get the speed component, you're moving the bar fast, you just move it to the front. Now your front squat's building, and then you don't have all those moving parts that you're trying to do for speed.
Agree. The same thing with like a speed pull. You know what I mean? You could do a close stance speed pull. A lot of different things. That's what's cool about the conjugate method is it can help anything. Like if you want to build a clean, like you could still use a dynamic day to build it. And things like that. So that's the cool thing is I think, the conjugate method gets pigeonholed into powerlifting. And, we talked about that earlier and we talk about a lot on our podcast. And it wasn't developed for powerlifters. Louis was just smart enough to use it for them. You know what I mean? Like he said, he didn't invent toilet paper. He's just smart enough to use it. You know what I mean? And so taking the system that was developed for, 40 different sports at the Dynamo Club and applying it to what we do now makes a lot of sense to me. Because if you go back and look at history, the Soviets had a pretty good idea as to how to train athletes. The first Olympics they were allowed to go to, they didn't even go to it. They sent I think it was 40 or 50 coaches to study the Olympics. Whereas I think with us, if we had that opportunity, we just send as many people, we're in the Olympics and this. They took it as a learning opportunity to figure out how are we going to train people for these events, which shows a growth mindset.
Conjugate is so much more than the book of methods. Conjugate is a plug-and-play system, and Louis worked with all sports. The Russians worked with all sports. You just take the methodologies and put them where you need them. Like you said, it gets pigeonholed for powerlifters. Well, that's only one aspect. There was a track and field aspect, there was wrestling aspect. They had all of these things that they plug and played, and they built this just incredible system that we see now, that even if you take one or two parts, it works, let alone if you did the whole system.
Well, and I think when you start to talk about the conjugate method, everybody wants to look at the squat, the bench, the deadlift, and everybody talks about that. We're not power lifters. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. Great. So you're knocking 15 to 20% of my program and basing it that's all we do. That's where the lack of education comes, and it's across the board in like high profile coaches. They talk about, well, you can't get fast moving the bar slow. Well, guess what? What's happening on the inside of the body is different than what's happening when you're watching it. You know what I mean? But when you look at the conjugate method for us, 20% is geared in the main exercises for the day. That's the max effort lower body day, max effort upper body day, or the dynamic work, with the speed work. The other 80% of what we do is building on the athlete's weaknesses. So what is the main goal of strength and conditioning? Is to try and help mitigate or prevent injuries. So and why do kids get injured? Because areas either are not trained at a high level or they're too weak. Sorry, parents, but a lot of times your kids get hurt because they're not strong enough, or because they don't have the capacity to handle the volume of practice or games. 80% of what we do in our weight rooms is geared around taking where the athlete's weaknesses are and trying to bring them up. So isn't that the goal of what we're trying to do? I mean, I think that's what everybody's trying to do, is keep the kids on the field, court, in the pool, on the track longer. And so, yes, is it going to help with performance? Absolutely. Because if you can gain strength in areas that are holding you back, you're probably going to run faster. You're probably going to jump higher. You're probably going to be able to cut better, which means you're probably going to be able to practice harder, coaches. So you're going to be able to practice your kids harder, because now they're, you can't make the club if you're in the tub, so to speak, right? If you're in the training room. So at the end of the day, like, again, that just comes from a lack of education. And people want to just look at it and say, well, they're box squatting. Oh, they're power lifters and this, that. Yeah, I mean, the box squat does help train some pretty strong people. But at the end of the day, like, we're doing it to develop our kids.
You have to learn to look for weaknesses instead of looking for strengths. And I think that's opposite of what we get taught in a lot of instances.
Well, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to figure out the areas where the kids are struggling, and you have to make it better. Why are they collapsing? Why are they rolling their shoulders out on a max effort pressing exercise? Okay, well, we have to build in some more work to develop that. And it also comes back to, like, from a coaching standpoint, it's really easy to coach your best athletes. But when your best athletes are in the weight room and you have some, newer athletes or younger athletes, those are the kids that need your attention. I think we get drawn to the kids with the 40-inch verticals or the 400, 500-pound squat. We want to be around those because those are exciting, no doubt about it. But, as a private gym, our focus needs to be on our next group of kids. How can we get these kids that are standing and watching those guys, how can we get you into that alpha rack? How can we get you on the jump mat hitting PRs? And so it really goes into focusing on the kids that need it to coach them even harder, kind of offset of what the question was, but yeah.
No, it's a very good point to make. And I know, Sunday morning you have new gyms open and you have a lot going on in your life, and I appreciate the time. So I'll start kind of wrapping this thing up with a few more questions, and we'll let you enjoy your Super Bowl Sunday. But you have to be a nerd on top of everything else to really understand this. You have to be in books when you're not on the gym floor, and you have to work with the math, and you have to work with the science. Getting people to understand it's more than just showing up to the gym and watching kids squat.
It's got to be your passion. It's got to be your passion. You have to love it. You have to also accept the fact that you only know so much right now. And if I look back when I was at Wisconsin the first couple of years, even the last 3 years with the O-line, there's a lot we would have done different. And to think back, and I talked to our, some of the guys like, Travis Frederick or Joe Thomas and some of those guys. I'm like, man, if man, if we'd utilize the bands more, because we didn't utilize the bands until at Sports Advantage. I just used chains all the time because that's really all I knew at the time. And so I'm thinking, man, if we would have had those bands, holy smokes, what we could have been able to do. And so just a lot of reflecting and looking back and like using some of the things that we did and be like, I wouldn't do that again. It was good when we tried it, but I think there's a better way to do it. And we have a lot of people to thank for that, right? There's a lot of people out there, like yourself and just so many other people putting out quality content to help other people. And I think that, it's really important. Like I said, I've been very efficient with my driving time and learning because, again, podcasts are great. There's a lot of good people out there as far as podcasts. I think our podcast is really good. I think your podcast is really good. And there's other people that are providing quality content. And the thing I always, tell people about content is it's great to learn new things. It's great to want to add new things. But at what expense to your program are you going to add something? So what am I going to add or what am I going to take away to add this little piece that we're going to do? We saw Chris Corfus speak about a month ago at Kimberly High School. A lot of great stuff. I mean, the guy's like on a different plane as far as like, how smart he is. And when you talk to him and some of the other stuff, and a great guy. And he was actually really impressed that we're a private gym, right? So we had 8 of my trainers were there and the high school, had 15 of their coaches. And he said, I've never seen a private gym and a high school come together like this for the betterment of each other. Like we were there to try and help each other, to sharpen each other's iron. And it's because, the relationships I have with their coaches. But I mean, that comes back to everybody, our staff. I want them learning. I want them constantly seeking a new way to do it. And I think the thing that Wisconsin taught me is to listen to your assistants a little more because some of our staff will bring stuff to the table. And I know like at Wisconsin, the first couple of years I was there's a lot of times I'm like, well, what about, and no, we're doing it my way. You know what I mean? And I learned that, that was the way it was going to be for a while. And I was really fortunate when Herbs took over he allowed a lot more conversation and stuff like that. So I think, if you're a young coach, this is more like me talking to my son right now because my son's going to take over one of my gyms. I'm like, dude, get in the gym, live in the gym for the first 2 years. Like get not like physically live in there, but like be in there, be a part of it. Like make it a part of who you are, because the people that were their gyms and their organizations are who they are. They're going to fight a little harder. They're going to learn a little bit more. They're going to, provide a little bit more. And I said, you're young. Like if you're a young coach out there, go volunteer somewhere. Go put your time in, getting a kinesiology degree right now, just that everybody's got that, separate yourself from other people, study different methodologies. If there's people you want to work, if you want to come work for us, study the conjugate method, have a base knowledge of it. So we can have a conversation and then just put your passion into helping people. How much knowledge can you gain to help other people achieve their goals? Because again, like we said in the beginning, if you're helping other people, all the other stuff that you want in life will come your way.
Well, I think you've set it up really well for this to be the last question I ask you.
Uh-oh.
Especially when you talked about Wisconsin and your younger guys going and talking to your older guys, and the older guys, no, this is my way. In some instances, you know what you know when you see it, and you're like, there's something in there. I see something in there that I need to develop further, or that I don't like, or vice versa. Being mature enough to not let somebody talk you off a ledge when you know for a fact you're seeing something that's opening up a new way you see all of it. Yeah. I think it's so easy to go and talk to a coach and be like, hey, coach, I'm seeing this. No, you're not. That's not right. What you're seeing is not right. But you know in your heart, hey, that no, there's something there. So there's a maturity level that comes with that, and saying, you know what, maybe I don't talk to you about it no more, but I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind, and I'm going to see how that develops.
I think that, and I think there's two kind of avenues to go on that, right? I think a lot of times, learning from, your experiences, but also I think having those mature conversations, if you didn't like the first conversation, coming back to it and just being real. Like for me, with my staff, my cell phone's always open for them. They got questions. They all know that they can bring anything to me, and they also know that I reserve the right to say no. You know what I mean? Because I've done it longer than they have. But I also feel like I try and give them some autonomy to be like, hey, what if we tried this? Hey, what if we tried this? And we're in a business, so to speak, where you got to evolve. And so we got to try new things. And if I can utilize the knowledge of our 7 directors plus me versus me to them, how much better can we be? And at the end of the day, that means I personally have to remove my ego from this. And, for a long time, and right, wrong, or indifferent, Sports Advantage was basically Brian Bott training. You know what I mean? I mean, with some people that worked in Verona and some people that worked in Wanakee. It's not that anymore, and I don't want that. I don't. And I want it to be Sports Advantage. I want it to be, our directors. I want it to be our assistants. I want it to be our kids. I want it to be our families. I want it to be a culture. I want it to be a community. I am the front man that takes, gets probably more credit than I deserve a lot of times, but I also get a lot of the negatives that come my way. So I also take a lot of pride in, if there's issues, me stepping out in front, hopefully trying to deflect that away from our directors. If there is an issue, because their job is to do their best work with our kids. In any way that I can help them, in any way they can help the organization, is really, really our message that we send to them every week. And like I said, I reserve the right to say no. You know what I mean? So.
Well, Coach, I can't thank you enough. This was absolutely incredible. For
Awesome.
you to take a little bit of time and sit down with me, it means the world to me. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch the game. I hope it's a great game. I'm really looking forward to watching Reba McEntire sing the national anthem. I grew up on country music with her, and my wife's really excited. She's become a Travis Kelce fan now with she's a Taylor Swift fan, so I love with that. But I hope it's a great game. At the end of the day, everybody's sad because football's gone for a long time. But I really appreciate you having me on, man. I love doing stuff like this. I hope any of the messages that I said today can impact some young coaches. If you're a young coach and you want to learn and you want to be around it, give me a call, come visit, whatever. We want strength and conditioning to continue to grow at the level that's growing, and do it the right way.
And I'll put your socials and your website and all that. I'll put it in the hyperlinks in the bottom so people can reach out to you and ask any questions they might have.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Coach.
You bet.